we going? Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind.
Yeah, and we're continuing our series on the brain. Last time we looked at success in the brain and our work and all that stuff. Now we're looking at love, which is your expertise.
My expertise. I'm such a love expert. Well, my favorite topic.
Yeah, and your favorite topic.
And yeah, what we're going, I think when you think of the title, My Brain on Love, the real question I think we want to answer is, how do I find a lasting relationship? How do I find true love? How do I find that partnership that's going to last? Because there's so many stages of love and the infatuation and then attracting to the wrong person. So we're going to talk about the neuropsychological part of love and also the spiritual part of love. So talking about whether we're really in love or is it just our neurons firing and our biology ticking in or our genetics telling us this is the person we love. So let's start with just the assumption when we talk about the brain on love, that we're not saying that the brain is the cause of love. What we're saying is that the brain is expressing or recording and reacting and helping our body have the experience, but it's not the cause.
Yeah, that would, let's say, be in alignment with what the research shows on how the brain works, and also considering what we know about consciousness from wisdom traditions, that the brain is kind of the intermediary for our experience of love. But let's back up a little bit, because in the first part of the series on success, we mentioned this idea that you can't understand the brain and what it's doing without understanding the context of where it's doing it. In other words, it's a brain environment interaction that we're talking about always. You can't really separate or take out the brain from its evolutionary environment and how it came about. So that's an important piece. If you want to understand what the brain is doing, you have to understand context. And for human beings, for us, culture is that environment that we move in. Culture is like our mom. It's the cradle. It's the womb that we exist in. Of course, culture includes language, religion, point of view, worldview, all those things that we consider important.
But they're not registered. They're registered in the brain, but the brain doesn't create these states. It's desired to kind of get the feedback and then record, and then basically.
No, you mentioned record a couple of times.
Not record.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's it's stimulated by the environment, and it's an exchange versus the brain is creating everything. That's what I mean. It's not. It's also storing. When I say record, I mean storing information, so it repeats the patterns.
Well, let's say one of the useful concepts in neuroscience is this idea of level of analysis. So what that means is that there's different entry points into a subject. So when we say the brain, what level are we entering that conversation? It's important to clarify that because you can enter it at a molecular level, right? You can say, well, let's look at the molecules of the brain and what it's made out of, or even deeper than that, what is the quantum mechanics of the brain doing? But for our purposes, we're looking at the cellular level, at the level of neurotransmitters. And how it's operating at that level. We should also mention the genetics, of course.
Yes.
So everything begins with genetics, because if you think, how did we get here? Well, it's a long line of my parents and their parents and going back generations. And then, I mean, if you follow that line, of course, it goes back into ancient history. Neanderthals, and pre-human kind of humanoid beings, and then animal life, of course, that from where those people evolved from. And back to one-cell animals, that genetic code that is in you, that is in every cell in your body, it gives you that connection to everything that's alive. The trees, the mushrooms, the animals, we're all related, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And whether we acknowledge it or not, we are part of this huge system that is our inheritance.
And so it's not like a lot of people feel like, why do I make these irrational choices in life? And it's because we're carrying with us this ancient system of memory, of cellular memory that we're carrying through. And then also, there's also epigenetics, which they just discovered, 10 years ago? Probably pretty recent. That your ancestors, not only their genes, but the experience they had. So if they went through the Holocaust, or if they went through a world war, or a famine, or a pandemic, there's certain things that turn on and off in the genes that from that experience, because you said it's the brain and environment. So we are getting a lot of things that we didn't experience in our personal life handed down to us. And then, of course, we have our own personal experience. So let's define, like, what does the brain do when it feels a love or attraction for someone? What's really the mechanism that's happening neurologically?
Yeah. So the genetic code is set up to pass its information on to the next generation, right? It's almost like our main mission, or one of our main missions in life. Anytime you're given a body of any form, the main primary mission is for you to reproduce.
The urge to merge?
The urge to merge, to pass on the gene. It's built in. I mean, that's why there's so much life on the planet. The urge is always there from the very beginning.
And also, too, from a social standpoint, from the brain, they talk about that social, there's safety in numbers. So almost we're wired to not want to be alone. There's something about being alone that makes us feel, and a lot of people say that, I feel like I'm single when I'm alone. And when I'm in a relationship, there's something more solid, like you have a family unit, you feel like you belong. And some people don't talk to their families anymore, and they feel isolated. And there's that real yearning for connection. And so that's not only just because it's a beautiful emotional need, but also from a survival standpoint, from our pre-human experiences of being in a herd, being in a tribe.
Yeah, I mean, you can think of it this way. So there's this primary mission to pass on the genes, right, to reproduce. And then nature and humans through culture find many ways of expressing that, right? So you see dating sites, you see people hooking you up to blind dates. You see people introducing you to, they think, oh, I have somebody that you might like, and introduce you that way. Or just simply, people meet on the street, people meet by chance in the elevators, and they end up being together.
And there's this social pressure, I think, that people don't realize when you're single. And I was single till I was in my 40s, so I had the social pressure of the family asking, how have you met someone yet? When are you going to get married? And even I went to a gynecologist once, and the nurse was like taking my stuff, and she's asking my family history, and she goes, "Oh, you're 38." She goes, you don't have any kids yet? And I said, no. And she said, well, you better get started. And I was like, well, I don't have a relationship. Like, she made me feel so guilty, because it's that biological, like your biology's, your eggs are shrinking and all these things. So we have these other pressures, but also other people are uncomfortable with people being single. It's like they want everyone matched up, because it also makes them feel like they don't have to worry about that person, that they're out off on their own, being alone and all those things. So I think because of their own, that really deep need to be a part of a tribe.
Yeah. And so now at the level of human interaction, human culture, you see these three systems that evolved. The primary one is that sexual attraction, right? We spend, especially if you think about your teenage years on, there's so much attention and emphasis on that, finding the mate and finding sex and and how to do it, and
flirting,
so much
flirting,
interest.
like finding. I have a crush on this person.
So that's one of the systems that's identified in neuroscience, that there's this sexual urge, need, and with that we're hardwired for that. It's built in. The second system is more of the attraction. Who are the individuals that we're interested in?
The picker,
and,
our picker,
and who are viable partners for us, and how do we approach them, and how do we get them to go out with us, and all that system of attraction.
So one of the primary things we look for is health, because we want to merge. Yeah. So we were looking for someone who's going to, like a man, to be strong, to have strong genes, for a woman to have, the wide hips and the breasts to feed the baby and nourish the baby and make strong children. So there's this kind of, we scan the body, and even there's something about symmetry of the face that shows how good your genes are or not. There's something to that. Yeah,
there's some research that shows that we're even using smell and
the pheromones
that we give off, that unconsciously we're kind of gauging this individual for their health and reproductive viability. So you got the sexual drive, the attraction system, and then the bonding system. So three distinct systems that, of course, are interrelated, but we know they're distinct because you can have sex with somebody that you don't love or you're not even attracted to. We know that happens, unfortunately.
When you have too much wine, you wake up and you're like, oh no.
all those.
Not that I've ever done that.
Maybe a lot of movies, of course, are based on those kind of scenarios. So these systems they're all kind of leading us in the same direction, of course, the genetic predisposition to pass on the genes, but they're playing out in different ways, right? The sexual attraction, the mate choosing, selection, and then the bonding, the staying with somebody on the long-term marriage and long-term couples.
And so when we think about, when we do, let's say we're sexually attracted to someone and we do find them attractive and we're thinking that maybe I want to hang around this person, I want to start bonding with, there's it's a mutual thing usually. It's like you kind of feel that there's a hook in there, there's a little bit of back and forth. Although unless you become a stalker and it's just one way, but usually there's a little bit of both, like maybe a push and pull type of thing. And so we start to bond with that person. So what happens in the brain on that bonding level? Yeah,
the bonding, it's if we look at what's going on in our brain, and it's really a mind-body or a brain-body situation. There's very powerful hormones happening that are aiding in that process. It depends on the scientific viewpoint. I mean, there are neuroscientists who say it's all neurochemistry, right? Because we see these neurotransmitters and hormones operating. That's it. We figured it out, and then
that's what love is.
That's the way it is. Yeah. Whereas I think a more realistic point of view is that these are the mechanisms that the brain and the body are using, but they have to be triggered by the context, again, by the situation and by the meaning that situation is giving us.
So it's not what happens in the brain doesn't cause the love, but it's the effect of that interaction with that person genetically, attraction wise, and then you start to have the urge to merge, you want to bond, all those things, and then the brain is kind of saying, okay, well, this is how we're wired. And so the wiring itself, the kind of the neurotransmitters and the things that happen in the hormones that happen, what is really happening chemically? There's like a oxytocin that gets released when you're together?
One of the strongest bonds that we know between two human beings is the mother and the child. And That's one of the most powerful ones, right? The mother will sacrifice often her own life for the baby, which is a powerful bond, right, that exists between two human beings. So we know, for example, when the mother sits down to breastfeed the baby, does the actual act of the baby suckling on her breast releases oxytocin into her system. And that's a powerful hormone that aids in that bonding process.
Because it's based on the reward system.
It operates on the brain in different brain centers that have to do with losing fear. So you notice it when you're in love, when you really trust somebody, there's no fear, right? You feel very comfortable, you feel very safe. So it's operating at that level, that it's disarming our defenses and allowing us to open up to this person in a very intimate way.
And you and I were talking earlier, so this chemical that's released with the mother and the child, and it's from the lips.
Yeah.
That's probably what I was saying. Well, is that why kissing with someone releases that same? I mean, it's just, of course, there's a lot of connectors there with our
tongue,
body,
the lips.
Yeah, but there's something about that early memory of love that we remember, and that's why it feels so good to kiss people.
Yeah, and you notice that, let's say, playful lovemaking is kind of that playful interaction that's preparing the couple for the baby, essentially, for being kind of silly and playful and interacting that way. Lovers call each other baby, actually. So it's kind of built in that, we're getting ready for the baby, although we might not even be conscious of it. We know from research the orgasm releases a lot of the similar kind of hormones and neurotransmitters. Oxytocin plays in big time after that afterglow of sex, where you feel very relaxed, very intimate. You're bonding with this person big time.
And that's why I think men and women are, maybe, I don't know, I always think men and women are slightly different there. That women sort of get more attached after sex than a man does. That a man can detach, but maybe I'm just making.
You're gonna get me in
from
trouble.
From my own personal experience.
There are some theories, for example, that if you think, well, the woman has to be a little bit more selective because she has only a certain amount of eggs to contribute to the sexual, the passing on the genes, right? Whereas the man has a lot of sperm to contribute. And so the men can be a little bit more squanderous with their genetic contribution.
And that's why women, when they have sex, they want to bond with that person because they could be pregnant and that person better stay around. So it's more of a biological urge than, I think I love him. It's like, don't leave because I may have to bear your child. On a deep level. I mean, of course, there's other levels, but
yes,
on one of the levels.
And there's always exceptions. So you see in biology, there are no hard and fast rules, right? Men are more likely to cheat in general, but we know that women also cheat. And
well, I just always learn that when women, like I've coached single women for forever, and it always seems that after they have sex with a person, that it like kind of raises the bar in their relationship, where if they were just dating a bunch of people and then the one they have sex with is the one that they're more drawn to, or they feel like more they have to do something with, and it, even if it's the wrong kind of logical person for them, it's like they're attached in some way. And it's not really, I mean, it could be the sex and the bonding that happens, but also that idea of I'm not spreading my seed around, like what's happening. So let me ask you this. So we bond with someone and we have a relationship, and what I read is that the brain has certain pathways that it creates just for that person, that only for that person. So when you even think of that person, it releases that oxytocin. They start feeling good. You talk to that person on the phone. When they call or they text you, it's that height. So we start to get this reward system that's really wired for this person. So this is another reason why, from a neurological standpoint, why we freak out when they don't text us back, and then we feel that relief when they do. It's that reward system that we're...
Yeah, so we started off with the bonding, but that's actually the end point. Before that, there's that romantic stage, and that's what you're talking about.
Okay.
In the romantic phase, which is the selection, right? We're looking for the one or the partner that we're going to spend hopefully the rest of our lives with. This neurotransmitter, which is a little bit different than the hormones. Hormones are kind of long-term processes that go on in the brain and the body. But neurotransmitters are very quick. They give us a quick fix, kind of a shot of adrenaline, a shot of feel-good
high
hormones.
Feeling. Yeah. I call it the flurfy feeling.
Yes.
I have a technical term for it. I call it flurfiness.
Yeah, and the main culprit for that is dopamine. So dopamine is similar to when people snort cocaine or caffeine or tobacco, nicotine. It's a quick fix. You kind of get a high off of it. So when you meet somebody that you really like, this neurotransmitter kicks in, meaning you get a high, right? You get that flirty feeling, like you said. And you crave it. It has to do with...
You want more, right?
Yeah, you want more. You want to experience that again. You want that high feeling again.
And then we confuse that sometimes with real love. We think, well, I must be in love. Well, I used to think I have this feeling for this person, this attraction and this flirtiness, and it must be love. I don't. There's other people that I don't feel that with, and so we want to make sure we understand that it could be love, but it could just be neurotransmitters hitting off and the bonding and like that brain interacting with the environment to create this attachment and this bonding with this person. Now, so then let's say we have all these pathways in the brain for Joe, and you are dating for a month or two, and you're bonding, and then Joe decides he doesn't want to be in the relationship anymore. So your brain has all these pathways for Joe, and so every time you think of Joe now, there's no reward. There's no dopamine, and then it starts to create more heartache and this longing, and it's almost as if you're withdrawing. Yeah. And the brain, even after you break up, you logically know it's over, but the brain is still having these pathways for that person. So I always, when I read that and understood that, I thought, a lot of women, they're so smart, or even men, they're educated, and they break up and they just can't get over someone, and it's like your body's also working against you. Like it's not like you're weak in any way, or there's something damaged in you that you can't get over someone. We're built in, and our system is to connect, and so we have to override that or create a new system. But until that happens, that's why love and breakups are so painful. I mean, there's also the psychological element of it too, but biologically, even just that craving that's not being met is it can be turned into pain and sadness.
Because what is happening there is that the dopamine is hitting the reward centers very deep in the brain, literally the brain stem, meaning
so that
part of some of the oldest parts of the brain, and part of the limbic system, the emotions, which means that you're not going to be thinking rationally. It actually kind of overrides the rational executive functioning of the brain, where you're not able to think rationally. You're more going on that need for that feeling, almost like an addiction. You want more of that. You need more of that to feel okay.
So then one option is to try to get the person back and become a stalker, drive by their house, and you might even get a relief from just driving by their house or looking at their Facebook profile, and you can get obsessed. Or you could just go and redirect that addiction, or I won't say addiction, but the craving, to a new object, to a new subject that they become the object of your affection, and you're getting a high from that person.
Yeah.
Or you go back to the ex before then because they're safe and they're going to give you a little high, but then normally that kind of doesn't last. It's not as strong. And so is that why that height, that kind of that reward system, the way it's based, is that if someone is really really predictable, like they like you, it's the high isn't as high as if it's someone you can't have. Like there's something about that chasing, that not sure, and Freud called it the joyful return, this hide and seek, that they pull away and then they come back and they pull away, and there's something. That's why we keep going back to people, because the reward system is so high when we get back.
Yeah, but if you think about reward, really, it's the anticipation of that pleasure that we're craving. The anticipation, the build-up is much more powerful than the actual experience of the reward.
So chasing the reward.
Yeah, so chasing let's say, building up the anticipation of, when I get that reward, right, it's going to be great. That's what hooks people into that. People that play hard to get are more attractive in a sense, right? The harder they are to get, the more we want them in a sense. Well,
I was reading I read so many books on love when I was doing all the love coaching, and one book was written by psychologists, and they said the number one indicator of romantic love is uncertainty. That was one thing through their research they found in common. When they weren't certain if the person liked them back, their romantic feelings were higher than so that's why when you meet a nice guy or a girl and they look good on paper and they're open and ready for you, your brain doesn't go, woo, it goes, oh, okay. I don't know. I kind of wanted that craving. I want that dopamine. Give me a hit. Anticipation. Give me a hit of that dopamine. Yeah. So now we know, if we don't examine ourselves, if we don't examine our psychology, our past, and we just operate on that physical level of brain, body urges, we're going to not have that full experience of love. So we need to add in that other layer. So the next layer is the psychological layer that goes on top of that actually is not separate from the brain. It's part of the whole process. We can't separate the mind from the body. So psychologically, according to Jung, we're always attracted to someone who is most likely our shadow self. Like the things that we don't think we have in ourselves, we tend to look for that in a mate to complete ourselves in a way. So if we have, we don't think we're that great, but our shadow would be the opposite, someone who's bold and courageous. When we see someone who's bold and courageous, we want to hook up with them because it's like, now I can add that part, like like the power of having two. We have both sides together.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at Jung's philosophy and theory. We're looking for the other part of ourselves in a way. And then the relationship, what it does, it forces us to look at our shadow. But if we don't understand what's happening, as if we think, it's the other person that's making my life miserable, or on the other side of the coin, it's the other person that is bringing love to me and giving me all this beautiful emotion, then we're missing the point. We're not able to really use the experience for our self-development because we're projecting. We're thinking it's the other person that is doing this to me. When in reality, what is happening is that we're projecting all this, let's say, all this beauty, first of all, right? When we fall in love, we experience this other person as divine.
The hair blowing back, the glow, halo around them.
Exactly.
They can't do any wrong.
And beyond the neurotransmitters and the dopamine that's hitting our brain, in the mind, we are having a transcendent experience, almost like a feeling of God, right? Some people say, that this is the closest I've gotten to God, this feeling of love that I have for this person. And if you think how powerful that is, I mean, that we should be able to bond with a stranger, a complete stranger, right? That a year before, they didn't exist in our lives.
I know, that raised a completely different family, and you're inviting this stranger into your house. And I think biologically, that's why we have those mechanisms to get us hooked in to a person, because otherwise no one would ever get together. We would be, it's hard enough already, but if we didn't have the brain, we probably would never even date or meet up.
Yeah. And so these mechanisms have to be very powerful in order for that bonding to occur. And again, if you go back to the biology, we see that, it's about passing on the genes, being able to raise a family, all these incredibly practical things that, make life that continuation, right? It continues along into the next generation.
So let's say you didn't look at the psychological, so that would be someone who gets into, falls in love, they have the flirty feelings. And I've noticed this too, that a lot of couples, they get excited about the wedding, and then it's the wedding they're excited about, the next thing, and then the first baby, and then the second baby, and then it's the marriage just kind of doesn't get stimulated, the relationship. That kind of reward system, it's he's there all the time, I don't have to worry. That kind of mystery is taken away. And so it's something that you have to cultivate. I went to a wedding once, and the rabbi said, marriage is a long, dull meal with this dessert served in the beginning. He said a successful marriage is to serve dessert all through the meal. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, that we get lost in that one expression, and then we think that initial bond is going to just take us and carry us. And I think that's why when people go to break up and then they come back together, that reunion, like they say, like that breakup sex people have, like we got back together, it's so much more intense, and it's because of all these biological things that are happening in us, but also psychologically, we're connecting, we're completing a part of ourselves.
And throughout cultural history, people married into families, and people bonded not only with their mate, but with the family system. And now a lot of that structure is gone. Now it's two people,
mixed families,
kind of, or alone, essentially, without that extended family structure, because people meet and move off to another city. And they're pretty much this little family unit. Like
you and I.
But
we're close to family.
Yeah, we have a lot of family around us. But it's still, let's say it's not as supportive as it used to be. Now people have a lot more challenge to stay together. But you see that it's still happening. People still find a way to find each other, to bond and get married and have kids and all this.
So I think one of the ways that people can start, the question is, how do I find someone for the rest of my life? Like, how do I find that lasting, fulfilling love? And the key, I believe, and I'm sure you agree, I'm speaking for you, is personal growth and individuation, as Jung would say, is knowing who you are and constantly in that growth mode versus that stagnation of I kind of, very externally focused, acquiring earthly things, but not really developing spiritually, and growing yourself and individuating from the ego and really going beyond breaking the bonds of the body and the psychology, the conditioning, and really having another really a higher level of love that we can have. In the Greeks, they call it the agape, that higher spiritual love. So I would think that that's really love in its purest sense.
Yeah, I mean, Ideally, I would say that this biological urge to merge, and then the psychological, emotional experience of bonding is leading us towards that agape, to the opening up of the heart, to understanding that, we're all seeking the same thing, right? But all the spiritual traditions teach this, that you need to cultivate that. That yes, that's there, but you need to work at it. In other words,
it doesn't happen by on default.
Exactly. If you follow simply the natural urges that are in your mind-body system, they're going to lead you simply to sex and lust and kind of wanting more and more.
And heartache.
But without your deepening that understanding of what is this experience of love and of having kids and wanting to bond with people, it's leading you towards that deeper realization that we're all connected, that all life is worth nurturing and taking care of. That's agape, right? It's that universal love, not only for your family, but for everyone and everything.
Yeah, there's a difference between wanting someone to stay with you because they're safe and they make you feel safe on a biological level. I feel comfortable with this person and they're staying with me, to the consistency of having this deeper spiritual connection, because that's that unchanging part of ourselves. And to connect with a person on that level, like your unchanging self and my unchanging self, like the divine in me recognizes the divine in you, there's something that will transcend the body and the mind. And really it feels like when I met you, everyone asked, like, what did it feel like? And I said, it felt different. It wasn't that wild, it was flirty, yes. I mean, you have all those other elements. You have the sexual element and the flirtatious, but it had this other element that I'd never experienced before. And it was a feeling of being home. Like I've returned home. Like there was something deeply familiar about you and your energy was just so grounded. I don't know if you thought the same way about me, but it's just kind of that recognition, and it's something that's beyond the kind of the, I hope he likes me, or I hope we're going to have sex soon, or flirtatiousness. It was just this other place, and I think that it's the potential's there for everyone, as long as both parties are on the path of growth. And so, if you're on the path of growth, I highly encourage you to check in and ask yourself, is your partner or the partners you're dating, are they on a path of growth? Because if you are growing and they're stagnating, eventually there's going to be a disconnect. And so you want to really find someone who's open to where you are at. If you're not into personal growth, then it doesn't matter. It's like, fine, you find another person to biologically connect with. But I think a lot of you listening are on a spiritual path, and it's so important. I remember when I was single before I met you, my friends would be like, don't worry about finding a guy who's spiritual. Some matchmaker told me, you can teach him. I'm like, I don't want to teach anyone. I want someone who I can have conversations with and we can learn from each other. And I think that's really, I think we've been together 16 years almost, and it's always new because we're always growing. You and I are always evolving, so it can never get stagnant. And that's really when we answer the question of what creates lasting love, is that you are with someone who's a partner on your journey. Yeah. Beyond just the biological and the psychological patterns, that you're really transcending into something really wonderful. And those things are nice too, but it's just that other level of love that I think many people seek.
Yeah. So Jung, when he was studying these things, he looked at a lot of cultures around the world. So what he noticed that a lot of these traditional cultures, that they had very specific rituals and systems to help people go through this transformation in a symbolic and supportive way. In other words, you weren't left onto your own devices to figure out love.
Just go to college and find someone.
Yeah, there was a structure to it. A lot of those structures we kind of see in the Catholic tradition or in other Christian traditions as well, that they were there to help the individual understand that this was more than just an individual thing you were looking after to find a mate. That it was really playing into community, into your spiritual life, into a bigger process somehow. Now the rituals are still there. Baptism and marriage, right, where they say what's joined here on earth is joined in heaven, and kind of all that.
Which is a very powerful statement. A lot of people don't realize that when you're married in a church or even by a priest, or that ceremony with your family around, that's why it's so important, and it's not to be taken lightly, like it's a big party. And well,
that's what Jung was saying, that the rituals are there, but the meaning has been lost. The other, let's say, the supporting culture around that has been lost because it's fragmented. If you just go through a ritual, it doesn't mean it hits the mark. You have to undergo that transformation from within. And that's why he was developing that whole psychology of the hero's journey, individuation, the ability to take people through this transformation, so that they could then take advantage of the rituals and use the rituals as a way of enacting that deeper transformation, not only in themselves, but in their family, right? In their love life, in the community, and in their spiritual life.
So one last question. The people we're attracted to, are they reflective of our level of growth? Like we normally resonate with people that are kind of on our, like if we haven't done shadow work and we're very attached, and we'll tend to attract people on that level. And then as we grow, we start to create or are attracted to a different level of person, kind of more awake person, a consciousness level, like more conscious, more aware.
Yeah, I would say that whoever you're attracted to at this moment, they're saying something about who you are.
Yes.
They're reflecting your unconscious mind in essence. And if you understand that principle, and you're lucky enough to understand Jungian theory, or at least to have access to a Jungian coach, then you can take that situation, take advantage of the situation, because it's giving you an opportunity to understand your deeper self.
Where most people will say, I want him to change, I want her to change, or try to bring them up to speed and get them along. But a person really needs to make that decision themselves. You can't force anyone to grow or like what you like. So it's really about openness and openness to learn. And then what is triggering you about that person, good or bad, is showing you something about your mind.
Yeah, but it's that old saying, birds of a feather, right? If you're on your path, you're more likely to find people that are on similar paths.
So, okay, I have one more question. So let's say you get to agape love. How does the brain respond in an agape love situation, a higher spiritual love situation?
Yeah. When we look at Vedanta or some of the Buddhist traditions, yoga philosophy, we know what they're after is total transformation, which transforms the mind-body completely. It restructures the way the brain works, essentially. Because what happens is when you de-identify with the ego, and really that's what love requires of you, isn't it?
That's why people are afraid of commitment, because they don't want to let go of their that's a selfish I, like, don't change me, don't tell me to do something I don't want to do.
When that really happens, when you're able to let go of your ego as the central focus of your psyche, and you allow this more powerful sense of self to emerge, it changes your whole life. You're able then to act in the world you don't necessarily have to leave the world. You don't have to go off to a monastery. You can continue to work and grow a family or be in a relationship, but you're living a spiritual life. In other words, you're perceiving the world as a spiritual living thing instead of I'm inside my head trying to survive, trying to take care of myself. Yeah, and the world is out there.
So it's like you create a temple for the relationship. It's like there's a temple that you both go and you surrender your egos to and really become, that would be a good visualization. That would become a really good, you're merging on a higher level that really sometimes doesn't look the way other relationships have looked before when you were just going on the brain level or the psychological level. So, wow, what a juicy topic. So next week, we're going to talk about the brain on health and wellness and how the mind body works with the brain and losing weight and being healthy and staying young. And we're going to teach you anti-aging tricks. No, but really the how the body is really an extension of the mind and how the brain interacts with the environment and creates the patterns that we have in our body.
Yeah, and I think the overriding message, let's say the usefulness, because a lot of people tell us, well, give me something practical to do. The practical thing is always that it's pointing to the work is in your own mind, with your own mind, that we tend to want to fix our partners or want to change partners or want to find the right partner for us that's going to make us happy. No, the work is finding that happiness, that wholeness within you. Then you can share it with your partner.
It's more about sharing. Where am I bringing to the relationship to share versus what am I bringing in the relationship to get? And when we're in that get mentality, we're coming from ego. When we're having that share mentality, not the what's that called? Doormat kind of sharing, like over giving, but sharing like in this place of selflessness and of being almost overflowing with feeling like you have something really great to contribute to this partnership. That person's going to feel so happy, with the relationship. It's not that pulling, like, please give me validation. Please give me that high, that dopamine. It's more like, hey, I have some dopamine for you. Would you like some? You're kind of sharing it and enjoying it together. So anyway, great topic. I love talking about it. I feel closer to you now, Rob, than ever before. So we'll see you next week on Soul Sessions, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.